Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Colin for YouTube back with another video for you guys and gals. I'm here to continue my read along of To Benight and Beguile, Book 5, Chapter 5 for the Family Empire. An afternoon chill filled the offices of the Lord Publishing House. There was a scattering of literary agents who worked busily at their desks, sorting through various manuscripts and papers, all searching for the next big novel and writer. Their nervous energy, compounded by the fact that their boss, Jacob Lord, was there this morning and seemed to be in a particularly frustrated mood. The agents, of course, read the latest gossip column from the local paper that their own company published, the Welshport Globe, where the lords were often written about. Jacob loved a good moment in the sun of his own newspaper's society page, especially when written by one of the paper's top journalists. But when it came down to the fact of his new long lost half brother was center of attention, as it were this morning, he was fuming. As Jacob worked through the various notes on his desk, he sipped from black coffee that his secretary nervously brought in. Her hand seemed to be shaking, and at first Jacob thought it was because of how cold it was inside the building, but she was covered in warm petticoats and skirts that would have warmed the fattest Eskimo on the Alaskan tundra. Jacob adjusted his black vest that had a golden chain leading from a hidden pocket watch and stood up at his oak desk to take the cup of coffee. He towered over the secretary, his hands cupped the saucer as she nervously smiled. "What is it?" he asked her as she stammered to reply. "Go on now, Sarah. I've got a lot of work to sort through. Has something happened? You're sort of skittish. You're more skittish than ever." "Mr. Lord, there's someone here to see you," Sarah, the secretary, replied. "So soon? It's only after 10? 9? It's too early in the morning for an appointment, isn't it?" Jake asked, searching his messy desk for his diary. "It's not something that I scheduled for you, sir," she replied. "Oh, then tell them to come back when they have an appointment," he replied. "It's very good, sir," Sarah shot back quickly. Jacob's eyes widened. His ex, he hadn't seen Mary in over a year. Suddenly, everything he had done to her over the years came flooding back. How he manipulated her to shoot Sebastian so long ago, how he used their daughter Charlotte as a weapon against her, how he had tarnished her reputation around town before that. For a long time after Sebastian's shooting, she'd been missing. People thought her dead, but she'd returned. When it was revealed to her the whole entire shooting was faked, of course, that too was another of the lie of the Lord's doing to cover up the scandal. "Please show her in," Jacob said as he sat back down with his coffee. "Bring her coffee," he added as Sarah nodded. She would. Seconds passed that seemed to be never ending as Mary entered the wooden paneled office of her ex, Jacob Lord. She stood there in front of him, glowing as she was 7 months pregnant, her hair tied back in a blonde braid, allowing the stunning blue of her eyes to shine in the low brightness of the office table lamp. Sarah rendered and handed Mary coffee. Mary thanked her, and Jacob stood up, forgetting his manners. "Please sit," he said to her. Mary sat and placed the saucer of coffee on the desk in front of her, a stack of old books. "These any good?" she asked of the book as she picked one up and flipped through its yellow, dusty pages. "Are you here to ask me about books, or for a free cup of coffee?" Jacob asked in a jest. Mary lifted a brow. "Obviously not. I wouldn't have come at all if I didn't think it was important to see you in person," she said, replacing the book. "What is it? Something about Charlotte? I know you're eager to see her." I'm sure you'd like to share your happy news, Shaker replied, referencing the pregnancy. I've softened, Mary. Since my own child came into this world, we can arrange for Charlotte to visit. Oh, Mary said, shaking her head, confused with his kindness. Thank you, but that's not it. Jacob furrowed his brow. Then I don't know how to even say this to you, but I'm just going to say it and let it sit with you. Sebastian is alive, Jacob. Jacob stared at her and smiled, but did not reply. Did you hear what I said? She asked, seeing as he just sat there like the cat that ate the canary, and smiled. Have you ever known me to not know what happens on this island? I know everything, Mary, especially when it comes down to the ins and outs of my family. I know about Sebastian, Jacob said. How do you, how I was at the lighthouse the night my mother kidnapped little Gabriel. Sebastian saved his son, then handed me the child to take back to his mother, Jacob revealed. And Evie, Mary wondered. No, she doesn't know. Sebastian asked that I keep her in darkness on the matter. He said to allow her to continue to believe he died in the fire of Lockwood Thicket. Mary seemed somewhat relieved that the devious Jacob already had Sebastian on his radar, but simply knowing the vampire was alive was still only part of the story. The rest of it might not go over as easy on her ex. Jacob got up and lit a cigarette near his window, the light of the winter morning that was quickly slipping into a sunlit afternoon. The window lit his hazy eyes a fresh greenish brown color, and his warm peach skin making him look younger than his 52 years. There's more, Mary said shyly. More? There's always more, Jacob said through a puff of smoke. What? He's in a state of uncontrolled anger right now, and I don't know what he's capable of. It's about his son Gabriel. The child has lost his hearing, and the circumstances of how that happened, well, I wish I could explain it without sounding as if it were done on purpose, but a mistake happened, and she began to ramble. Jacob, knowing her inside and out, knew that she was trying to cover up something and interrupted. What did you do, Mary? He said, grinning strangely. It was an accident, Jacqueline and we. It was an accident, she said, shooting up from her seat. Jacqueline, Jacob asked, somewhat recognizing the name. She's a woman from Boston that Sebastian and I sought out. She's here now in the islands, and she and I accidentally did something that I know hurt Gabriel. But I swear it was an accident. I would have never hurt the baby ever, Mary said, holding her own tummy. Gray. Jacqueline Gray. Evie's friend? Jacob asked. Mary's eyes widened. She knew that Jacqueline had been poking around Terramore to be around Evie, but had no idea it was to the point Jacob would have known the name. Have you met her? Mary asked. No, not officially, Jacob confirmed, but the staff at Terramore have mentioned this visitor of Evie's often. I even had a request from the house for books on art from our catalog for some sort of tea party that Evie was throwing to this new friend. What of her? She would be worried. Should we be worried about her? Jacob, listen to me. Jacqueline is a person which Mary paused before revealing their dual powers under the coven of the Sisters of Highfield. She's a woman with great influence, especially over Sebastian. They've grown close, and she's made things worse for all of us by how she enables his worst attributes. Instead of putting out the flames of his rage, Jacqueline pours gas on him. She's driving a wedge between my cousin and I fear for everyone now that he's allowing his darkest thoughts to control his motives. Jacob grabbed a glass ashtray and snuffed out a cigarette. He skied in his 12-shelf bookcase of his thick index finger and looked at the patch of dust that accumulated. He lifted a brow and sat back down at his desk. Mary followed him back to and sat to face him. Jacob sat back in his chair with his hand clasped over his stomach and realized that there was real fear in Mary's eyes and in her voice. She was truly frightened of what Sebastian was capable of. There was something in her words that sounded desperate, and her willingness to come to him face showed the seriousness of her worry about Sebastian Ward. He came to Terramore just the other night to see Gabriel. He indeed was in a dark state, Jacob revealed. You spoke with him? Mary asked. Spoke. Argued, fought, everything. He became physical. My eager little brother walked in on us. There was a scuffle between them as well. He added, Mary gasped, fearing Sebastian was revealed to Jonathan. Don't worry. I was able to rush Sebastian out of the house and said there was an intruder. Aside from having poor Evie go into a fit over her child's room being invaded, things died down from there. Jacob, listen, he won't stop. He's furious. He's on a warpath to keep his son safe, and he doesn't trust anyone anymore aside from Jacqueline. As I said before, they make a for a dangerous pet an alliance. I don't see anything in a way healthy and good. Not for them, not for anyone, Mary explained. Sounds like something I heard before of two unlikely lovers, Jacob said, hinting at his and Mary's past disastrous relationship. Mary rolled her eyes. I just don't need you to help me. I just need you to help me. Keep Gabriel out of Sebastian's hands. The child has gone through enough at such a young age. I don't want him in any more danger. I'll handle Jacqueline, Mary said. That's why I've come here. Mary stood up to leave, her heart pounding in her chest, hoping Jacob would do what she asked of him, knowing him as well as she did. She fully expected him to ask for something in return. Then he did something she did not expect. He surprised her. Mary, I'll have you escorted back to the docks and back to Good Island safely. Woman in your state shouldn't be wandering the streets and seas alone. Go now, and keep in mind that I have all the intentions on keeping my little great nephew safe and out of the hands of a bloodthirsty creature of the night, no matter how related to me they are, Jacob answered. Mary felt a lump in her throat. She was trusting a sweet young child to Jacob, a man whose diabolical schemes had taken her life into a direction of incredible pain and suffering. He'd done awful things to Sebastian, to Evie, his own mother, to his brother and sister-in-law, even his own child Charlotte when he locked her in the Tamworth turret. But she had no choice. Sometimes the only way to keep something safe was to entrust them to the most capable hands, especially when those hands were controlled by a conniving and twisted mind like Jacob's. She knew he'd ensure the child's safety. She had to trust him. There was no one else. Evie couldn't know Sebastian was alive. She'd suffered too much. At his many depths, already Rebecca was locked away in the asylum for almost killing Gabriel. Charlotte, only 13 years old, but Jacob was Jacob, and he had a secret weapon Mary hoped he'd use, the touch of his good wife, Celeste. Tell Celeste I appreciate it. I know she'll do what she can to, Mary said, hinting at her hopes of Jacob bringing in his wife as support for Gabriel. Jacob nodded and then added one more surprise to his ex's already full mind. And congratulations, Mary, on the baby. I'm sure Philip is ecstatic to be a father. Mary smiled back, but her face held suspicion over Jacob's sudden kindness. What she didn't know, as she made her way down the hall to the waiting man, Lord Publishing valet, that would escort her safely back to Good Island, was that Jacob and Celeste were already 2 steps ahead of Mary in keeping their tabs on young Gabriel. The baby was not only the heir to Sebastian's part of the family empire, but Jacob, Fabian, and Jonathan's direct competition for ruling it all once he turned 18. The one gift Rebecca had set up for any of her favorite grandchild Sebastian's heirs. He'll be just fine, Jacob whispered to himself coldly as Mary walked down the hall and turned back to the elevator to glance at Jacob slowly shutting his oak office door, then vanishing. Her stomach nodded. Ma'am, the valet said, opening the elevator door. Mary smiled politely and they entered the elevator, but her uneasiness was palpable. She felt like she had just given Jacob permission to commit murder. Later that afternoon, Gregory's second floor apartment above his constable's office in the village, Aurora woke from the nap in his warm bed with terrible cramps in her stomach. She tried to get up from the bed, but pain was too much, and she moved herself over to the edge of the bed with as much ease as she could. The pain was intense. Her body felt like it was on fire. She looked down, and light colored dress she was wearing was stained. Her water had broken. Aurora was in labor. Gregory, Gregory, she screamed as he burst into the room. What is it? It's too early, it's too early, she shouted back, showing him the wet spot on her skirt on the bed. Gregory swallowed hard as his mind flashed back to 5 hours earlier. Aurora had come for a visit. They chatted, had a small lunch, and then she took to the bedroom, as she often did in their visits, to nap. She was only 4 months pregnant, but the baby had grown so big that she looked to be full term. Her belly was large, heavy, and Aurora worried the child was growing in a strange and quick pace. At her appointments, all of her appointments, Dr. Ward had shown no abnormalities, but nevertheless she worried. It's that vulnerable moment where she napped away the small lunch she shared with Gregory. Then is when he injected her with the labor-inducing medicine that she had gave him. Aurora had never felt the prick of the needle. Her sleep was unbothered the whole time. Now she was about to have the baby, and everything had turned topsy turvy. We have to get We have to get to the hospital, she said. Lay back, Gregory ordered. What? No, Greg, we have to get to the hospital, Aurora said through gritted teeth. The baby is coming, and it's too early. I'm not due for months. It's too dangerous to move you now, especially since we don't know how long you've been in labor. Dr. Hoffman has a telephone. I'll go down to the office and call her and get her to come to us with a nurse. Gregory said, Hoffman, Dr. Ward is my doctor, or said as he at her head began to spin. Gregory, I don't feel well. I'm dizzy. Aurora said, just relax, relax, lay back. I'll get a Shia here. But before Gregory could finish speaking and explain how fast a Shia would get to the house, he looked down and saw Aurora was bleeding. Hurry, Aurora murmured as she faded into bed. Jesus, Gregory whispered to himself. He rushed to his house, knocking over tables and running into walls as he rushed down the steps that led into the constable's offices that had a few officers working that afternoon. They jumped to the attention as their bosses paid no attention to them, and he just to the large box telephone attached to the wall. The phone lines in Welshport were few. Only the constable's office, the post office, the hospital, the village, town hall, and scattering of wealthy islands who could afford a telephone had them. He picked up the receiver and frantically pressed down the lever to get the operator to click on. She connected, and he quickly told her to get him in touch with the northwest wing of the Welshport Hope Hospital, where Ashia would be stationed. Ashia came to the phone from her rounds in the hospital room. The nurse pulled on Ashia's hand. so hard that her bracelet marked her arm in a half circle around her wrist. I'm sorry, Dr. Hoffman. Constable Raines said it was an emergency, the nurse explained. As she didn't even go to the phone, she knew that it was time. She jumped into motion, quickly grabbed her medical bag from her small office down the hall, and yelled back to the nurse, "Tell him I'm on my way." The nurse stood at a large phone on the way, its black cord tangled around her nervous finger as she watched Dr. Hoffman run down the hallway and disappear into a stairwell. Constable Rains, the nurse asked. She'll be there any moment. A quick taxi cab later down the main street of the village that crawled into the shape of a question mark over a hill from Welshport Hope to Midtown, where the constable's office was and where Rain's apartment sat above, as she had made good on her promise. She bounded into the office and ran up the stairs to the confusion of the few police that were there, who shrugged at watching Dr. Hoffman skip steps up the stairs to the apartment. And once she got to the door, she didn't knock, as she had pushed her way in to find Rains leaving the kitchen with warm rags for Aurora. He turned to the door and somewhat started, but the shock quickly evaporated. "Hurry!" he shouted. "Don't panic. We have time. She's in labor, but she's not in danger," she said. "Isn't she?" Gregory said, lifting a rag that was stained with blood. "She's hemorrhaging," she asked. "Where's the nurse? You said you'd bring a nurse," Gregory added. The two began to make their way to the bedroom where Aurora was out cold. "I thought it was better if we kept it between you and I. I don't want anyone else to get tangled in this," as she replied as she pulled open a door to find Aurora slowly coming out of a fainting spell. As she began her examination and saw that there was blood, lots of it. There was no danger, but seemed to have been something kind of a blockage or clot had cleared. She was now no longer bleeding, but the shocking view of dark blood on white sheets, so much that only the lower and upper parts of the bed were still white. It was obviously an alarming scene to witness for Aurora, and even more so Gregory. "Are you sure she's all right?" Gregory asked, his heart sinking, worrying for Aurora's life. "What's happening?" a Gregory Aurora asked. "Miss Jordan, hello, my name's Ashia. You're in labor, Miss Jordan. We're going to have you're going to have your baby," as she explained. Ashia. "Nikki, where is Nikki here?" Aurora asked of her son's girlfriend. "No, ma'am, it's just me. Gregory called me to help with the delivery. You're going to have a child very soon now. So I'm to ask you to begin pushing. Do you understand, Miss Jordan? You'll need to push now," as she instructed. "I'm too early. I can't push. The baby isn't ready to be born," Aurora said, sweating profusely through her nightgown to the top of her chest and upper neck, where so wet the skin could be seen through the white fabric. "I understand, but the baby is coming, and we can't make it go back," she smiled, attempting to calm her patient. "Give us a push, Miss Jordan. Please push." Or nodded as she was exhausted. She had lost a good amount of blood, but was pushing. She was fighting to keep her premature child alive. She pushed and pushed. Gregory assisted as best as he could and brought clean towels, fresh clean water, and held Aurora's hand as she continued to feel the pains of labor, and her mind swelling in and out of blackness. She wanted to sleep. Her body was in immense pain, and she was screaming from the top of her lungs. All she wanted to do was give birth to a healthy child and live. But the plan was like nothing the pain she felt was nothing like she'd ever felt. Both her other children were natural births. She had delivered them awake, alert, and in pain. This child was almost ripping her insides out. She felt as if the pain was going to kill her, break her in half. And then, as the labor began to hit the hour mark, birth, Aurora heard she yelp as the baby came out. A rush of energy swooped through Aurora's body like a waterfall, drenching her whole body. Then she fell back into darkness and fainted again. Aurora heard it. Aurora heard a she yelp as the baby came out. A rush of energy swooped through Aurora's body like a waterfall, drenching her whole body. And then she fell back into darkness and fainted again. Gregory quickly tended to Aurora as she had cleaned the baby and held it close so she could feel its little heartbeat through the pulse. Its fingers, it looked up at her. If Ashia was his mother, it grabbed onto her finger tight and cried. What do I do? She asked Gregory. He turned to her and saw her crying. Take it, take it like we agreed, Gregory said. Fainting Aurora was unconscious. I don't know. I don't know where, she said. She began to feel like she was a monster for taking the baby from its mother. How cold she she suddenly had it, these imaginary thoughts of her own birth, where she was taken from her parents and given to her adopted family. We agreed, Ashia. We agreed this was for the best. This was the best thing for all of us. Take the child and give it to a home that can raise him well. Don't go back on me now. We've come so far, Gerger said. She looked down at the baby. It was healthy. Oddly, it was so many months premature, but it was completely to term. The baby had miraculously grown fast. A first trimester baby was born to full term. How, as she asked herself. Go, Gregory shouted and turned to Aurora to wipe her brow again of sweat. When he turned back to Shear, she was gone, and the bedroom door was left slightly open, the amount of space big enough for Shia and the baby to pass through. Gregory had fallen asleep. It was now 4 hours after the birth. He had cleaned Aurora, given her a bath, helped her dress, changed the sheets without even getting her out of bed. He had done all this while she slept. Another side effect of the medicine she had was given to induce labor. He had done all these things a nurse would do for Aurora, who slowly woke up for her days after the birth. She squinted. Everything was blurry. The room was cast in a haze of dark colors from the dim lights. She tried to sit up and wrenched in pain. Her moaning woke Gregory in the sitting chair across from the bed. Easy, easy, he said, stumbling to her bedside. Gregory, I had the baby, she said in a weak voice. Yes, she said sadly. Where's the baby? I need to feed the baby, she asked. Gregory sat down and held her hand. At this point, the baby was long gone, now only a memory in his mind, and he now had to set the rest in motion. The baby was gone, which wasn't a lie, but she had to believe the baby had died. I'm sorry, love, the baby didn't make it. It was too soon for it to live, Gregory said. What? Didn't make it? Gregory, where is it? I want to see my child, Aurora begged. Darling, listen to me. The baby didn't survive. You cannot see it. She took the child. She's going to make sure it's properly taken care of and given a good resting place. You did not want to see that baby, not in the shape it was born in. I'm sorry, my love. It was better you didn't see it. Lies. You let her take my baby, Aurora asked, outraged. Let her? No. I had to, medically. She has to be sure that the baby is well. Darling, that his body is taken care of correctly. It did not live, Gregory said, lying again. No, no, it can't be. Please tell me where the baby is, Aurora begged. Darling, Gregory said softly as Aurora sat up and crumpled in his arms, so sobbing to his chest. The pain was real. Aurora's awful experience with Caspian led to a shocking pregnancy, but the cause did not match the effect, even though she was terrified of what was happening to her, having a child so late in life. But the monster Caspian, it didn't mean she didn't have an emotional attachment to the child. It was still part of her. It was still part of her children, too. Part of her was gone, vanishing into thin air. She never even set yes on the babies. Aurora's heart was broken in a million pieces. What was it? Aurora asked through her sobs. Gregor looked at her oddly. A boy or girl, she said. It dawned on him that he didn't even know. He forgot to ask Ishio. Then he felt another lie coming to his lips. It was like bubbles pushing up from his stomach to his throat, and then out of his lips. A girl. Laura's eyes filled with tears, and then she sobbed again. The baby girl was gone, dead. Now at her own now at her own apartment across town, she laid the new baby in a makeshift crib that was the top drawer of her dresser. It lay there crying, with its arms stretched up, reaching for its missing mother. As she packed back and paced back and forth in her room, too, in complete shock of what she had done. She couldn't believe she had helped Gregor, but she knew too much was at stake for her not to. So many secrets would spill out, and then what would become of her? She went to the child, so cute, so pink and crying. She picked it up and rocked it in her arms, and then it fell asleep. She gave it milk as soon as she could get it warm enough for the drink. She looked at the baby and pulled back the little white blanket it was wrapped in that she took from Gregory's house to see the sex. She smiled. Happy birthday, baby boy. Aurora and Caspian's child was a baby boy. Back at Lord Publishing, Jacob continued his work sorting various editorial news articles that were sent to him from the Welshport Globe. They needed his approval. Many of the stories written in the paper were free of any of the lords using a veto power to publish, but in the case of politics and several other more dubious stories regarding surrounding business and legal matters around in the area that may affect the family's bottom line, the lords like to check, edit, balance their way through. It was a perk of being the head of a publishing empire, after all. As he worked through the afternoon and into the very early evening, his office filled with cigarette smoke, trapped by the closed windows that held off the winter wind, but something did blow in. His wife, Celeste. Celeste's cheeks were pink from the cold. She came in from her hands warmly secure in the mink muff that she quickly removed as Jacob happily stood up to greet his beautiful wife, who didn't seem to be in a particularly good mood. I walked past the secretary. Don't be angry with her for letting me in. Nothing would stop me from getting in here, Celeste said, sitting down in the far corner of the room in a leather sofa, her long dark dress fluffing up to the waist, giving her the look of a large upside down burgundy poppy. You're my wife. You don't need an appointment, Jacob smiled. Are you here to meet me for an early dinner? I can have something brought from the Gramercy, Jacob asked. No, Celeste replied in a serious tone. This is not a pleasure visit. Uh, oh, early this morning, Eve and I went up to Mass at St. Catherine's with the boys after we met with Father Donovan Ryan, and she surprised me with what she said. No, surprise isn't exactly the word. Scared me half to death, perhaps, Fitz. What did she say? Jacob wondered. I'm worried for her, Jacob. She has this way of hiding things inside her feelings, her thoughts. I don't really know how to explain it. Events happened to her as she walked around the mansion like nothing is wrong. And then we meet with Father Ryan and she divulges strange things. She said she's been having this vivid dream of Matthew Winterbourne, dreams that are terrifying her, dreams of him telling her to come find him, that he's still alive. She seems to be in two places at once. She has one foot clear headed here and in the real world where she takes care of her child, and then she has another foot distracted in a world of bizarre dreams that consume her mind without anyone even knowing. How did Ryan react? Jacob wondered. Well, to her face, he came off like a priest would, concerned, ready to help. He offered advice, but he didn't just offer advice to her. He spoke with me too when the two of us were alone, Celeste revealed. He said he was concerned for her and the amount of stress she's been under for the amount of time she's been under it. Years really since she's moved here when the two of us were alone, Celeste revealed. He said he was concerned for her and the amount of stress she's under, for the amount of the time she's been under it for years. She had, she had, what else? Jacob asked, sitting on the edge of his desk facing his wife. Les took a deep breath. She shuffled over her large burgundy skirt off of the sofa, revealing a portfolio she had brought with her, the leather-bound portfolio of the initials Jacob engraved on the cover, flipped open on Celeste's tab, then several documents that she chose and pulled out, handed to Jacob and took over, never leaving her seat. Jacob froze as well, unsure of what she was handing him. It didn't take long for Jacob to understand what the forms were. They were legal forms clear as day, even for someone without a legal mind to read. Lifted a brow and reached down to his desk for a cigarette and placed it to his pouty lips. Is this what you really want? Jacob asked Celeste as the cigarette dangled and bounced with his words. Celeste shrugged. She's been my friend for years now, and I adore her, but maybe it would be for the best. It was sort of what Father Ryan alluded to, Celeste said without answering Jacob's question. But is it what you want? Jacob asked again. What could be we could be unofficially godparents, she said. Darling, Jacob chuckled, these forms are much more than making you and I official godparents. We'd be his legal guardians. Effectively, we'd be his parents. We're not going to say I didn't think of this myself at some point. At least it was some sort of plan B in my head. But if it's your plan A, then I think I'd agree to do it. If this is truly what you want, Jacob said. I want what's best for Evie and her son, and maybe giving her a break from all of this is getting some help would be a better fit for her, Celeste answered. And it would be better for us, Jacob said, controlling little Gabriel's financial future is in our best interest. And I'm sure you've realized it would be most benefit Fabian, our son, as Gabriel's guardians. He would be safe from the sprawling sanity of his parents, and our child, well, would be in a better position for his future, Jacob explained further as he grabbed a pen from his desk from his mother's. Celeste said, correcting Jacob's use of the words parents. Jacob sat back on the edge of his desk. His deep groan when he sat echoed the age of the oak it made of. He put down the papers. Looked Celeste directly in the eye. There was another big shoe to drop on the issue of the Lord family tree getting bigger and smaller at the same time. No, I mean parents. Celeste, this is going to be quite surprising. I need you to stay calm, but Sebastian, he's alive, Jacob revealed. Celeste stood up from the leather sofa, her dress swishing down back to her feet in a crimson cascade that went all the way down to the ground. She gulped, cupped her hands at her stomach as if to hold back a deep scream. It was pushing its way out. Her eyes were like saucers. Her heart felt as it skipped a beat. No, he can't be alive. He died, Sebastian. He died in that fire. Evie saw him. She watched it happen in front of her very eyes, Celeste replied in a very tense tone of her voice. Jacob shook his head. No, no, my love, he's alive. Evie must have been mistaken, or maybe he survived somehow. Based on the creature that he's become, I don't know, but I saw and spoke to him myself twice, Jacob said. Twice, she shouted back. Keep calm now. We have nothing to worry about. Sebastian isn't out to hurt any of us. Although the second time we met, he did have a bit of an issue, but I can resolve that soon. You to do what I need you to do is understand that he is no threat to us at all. The world thinks he's dead, and I am sure Sebastian wants to keep it that way. But if he's alive and Evie isn't able to take care of her son, like we are saying, no court in the world would keep Gabriel from his natural father. Celeste replied her logical explanation was missing one important bit of information that Jacob was very happy to fill her in on. There's absolutely nothing natural about Sebastian Ward. He, for one, admitted to that. Evie will have to deal with that fact that her crumbling mental state is no way, shape, or form for the mental state of the woman who can care for her son. As for Sebastian, well, he's as good as dead. To us and the courts, Jacob said. I don't know. I don't know now. I don't know about this, she worried. Celeste, this was your idea. You brought these papers up. And I think it's a brilliant idea. You've decided in the way of a woman who has set her mind on the future, her son's future. The company is his to take when he is ready, and I want that. Having anyone else in the same position would put our son in jeopardy of losing it to he had a rival. Gabriel is that rival. We can fix that by signing these papers, Jacob said. Celeste began to feel some sort of guilt. Jacob knew exactly what her plan was. He had just revealed it to her out loud. To her, she felt that maybe if she didn't say it herself, that maybe she could ease her way out of it and not feel so bad for doing this to her friend. The papers in Jacob's hand were clearly very hard to fight. The two very powerful lord in a strong marriage had giant lawyers behind them. Eva was a single mother with a history of a time in a mental asylum, albeit fraudulently by Jacob's hand as well. She had decided, based on her conversation with Father Brian, to petition for Gabriel's rights to be removed from Evie's care and have her sent to a church for a mental break again. This time her mental state was even questioned by a very good witness, a priest. Jacob looked at his wife, whose nervous was on the edge. She didn't know what to do. Now Jacob slid the papers on his desk over to the corner closest to Celeste, the pen strategically positioned and pointing into the line of her signature. Shall we? He asked. She wanted it, Fabian's life said. She wanted Evie to find help. She wanted Gabriel to be safe. Whatever was going on with Evie was now his dangerous father. She wanted her to own sense of security, though it all signing these papers became legal guardians or yet another order of the Lord family would give her more and more power than the household and empire of the Lord family built over decades and decades. And Rebecca was now gone. This would mean Celeste would unceremoniously become the matriarch and most powerful woman at Terranmore. She dreamt of this kind of life as long as she could remember. As she picked up the pen, she wondered how Evie would feel once the paperwork was filed with the court. The court was highly paid under the table of the lords themselves. She took a break and reached down to sign. Jacob grabbed her wrist and pulled it off the paper before she could. His two large hands grabbed her wrist. He pulled her close and kissed her deeply and passionately on the lips. Their tongues touched, and she could taste his cigarette. Then, when they parted, she signed the forms and handed Jacob his pen. He then signed, and they soon officially petitioned to take Gabriel away from Evie based on her fragile mental state. It was all for the growth of the Lord Empire, and for Jacob, Celeste's own gain. No one would be their direct competition and rival in the power play at home. No one. After a long day at Welshport Island, Mary was finally setting in for the evening in her very small family cottage on Good Island, the island coincidentally named after her father's family years and years before Mary was even born. As she folded a few baskets of freshly dried sheets and towels that she had left near a warm fire, holding back the cold winter air, she felt her baby roll in her tummy. She smiled at her, feeling she had held her stomach and giggled and tickled her. The baby was so full of life, she couldn't help but remember her fondness of being pregnant almost 14 years ago with Charlotte. As Mary reminisced, silently folding her laundry, the front door of the cabin opened and walked in Jacqueline Gray, her common sister, that had betrayed her thirst to Sebastian. They glared at each other with eyes as cold as the winter beating on the cottage walls outside. "How dare you show your face here?" Mary said. Jacqueline scoffed. "Mary, please, I am not here to argue and fight with you. I'm just here to get my things," she said. "Good, I'm glad. I think I can speak for Philip when I say we don't want you here any more." "Never again," Mary replied. "You could have saved us all from this pointless war between us had you been honest with Sebastian in the first place. Instead, you and Philip decided that we lied to him. Of course he'd feel the way he does," Mary Jacqueline said, attempting to build herself a defense. "Jacqueline, we agreed to keep him in the dark because of his dangerous lack of control. We knew that be angry for obvious reasons, and when Sebastian's anger roars the way we saw it, no one is safe. I'm talking about life and death. We wanted to help Gabriel and avoid all of this. You decided to tell him, and not only to tell him, but to make it seem like this, if there was nothing nefarious about it, it was an accident," Mary replied angrily. "Lies are nefarious, Mary." Jacqueline replied as she walked a few steps closer to Mary, so that their eyes were not locked. "You're playing him. You're using what you know about what he has because you're using him. I don't know why you came back with him if it was only to cause this kind of trouble for us all," Mary said. "I came here to help you. Our mothers were coven sisters," Sebastian said. "You sent for me, and here I am now. I'm being exiled. None of this is my fault," Jacqueline reminded me. "We needed your help and we got it, but we didn't need you to betray us and lie to try to maneuver yourself into Sebastian's good graces. Not to mention sneak around his widow, Evie, getting to know her, befriending her at her home, reading her favorite books," Mary said, surprising Jacqueline. "That's right. I know what you've been up to. What would Sebastian do if he knew that Jacqueline, how would Sebastian feel if the woman he loved was for some reason lurking around Evie and getting so close to her that they'd become such good friends? I could tell you what he'd feel. He'd be livid. He wants Evie to be safe and away from everything we are. She suffered enough at the hands of the people like us, people of the shadows. Maybe he should know. Maybe I can find a way to let him know. Just like you found a way to let him know about what I accidentally did to Gabriel. Jacqueline's eyes saw red. She could feel the blood in her veins boil thick. Soup in a cauldron on fire. The feeling of being concerned was never good for a witch. And now her own sister, which seemed to be turning the tables, and the threat of losing Sebastian was too much for Jacqueline to handle. She had never been happier with a man, and no one, not Mary or Evie, no one would, alive would stop her from happiness. Jacqueline lunged at Mary. Her cold hands became wrapped around Mary's throat. Mary gasped for air and pulled at Jacqueline's fingers as they tightened around her neck. Jacqueline's gritted her teeth, but her eyes began to tear up. She couldn't believe what she was doing. It was almost as she were watching someone else strangle Mary right in front of her. Mary continued to gasp for air and walked backwards toward the fireplace where she had iron pans that she could use to warm things over the fire on hanging on the side. Iron hooks bolted onto the red bricks. With two eyes feeling like they were about to pop out of her head, she somehow reached backwards, removed the pan from the hook, and swung it upon the air, and it landed on Jacqueline's shoulder, narrowly missing her head. Jacqueline screamed in pain and realized her hands from it released her hands from Mary's throat and fell over onto a chair. Mary, her heart beating, her lungs pumping air back into her body, also fell onto a chair that faced Jacqueline's. Then, like a lioness attacking a gazelle, Jacqueline leapt from her chair and onto Mary and pulled her down. The two women were rolling around on the ground. Mary slapped Jacqueline. Jacqueline swung. Jacqueline's hand swung across Mary's face, scratching her cheek, making three long wounds slice across her peach-toned skin. Mary yanked at Jacqueline's hair, causing Jacqueline to scream and get off Mary. Mary got up. Jacqueline came at her again, and this time she used her powers. Jacqueline lifted her hand, and several kitchen knives came flying from the kitchen and into the living room. Mary ducked at the knives, stabbed into the wooden walls of the couch. Mary then used her own powers and lifted her right arm, and she swung it where if she were pulling on a lever. Flames of the fire roared out of the earth and into the room, blinding Jacqueline. With its heat, Jacqueline moved, avoiding the flames, and then lifted a fist. Out of Jacqueline's fist, a giant ball of pink light zipped through the air and hit Mary in the chest. The ball of light burned her clothes. Mary screamed, dabbing out the flames on her top with her hands. While she did so, Jacqueline went at her again with her hands around her throat. Mary again gagged for air. She pulled at Jacqueline's hair to no avail, and Mary went for Jacqueline's eyes, put her two thumbs into her eyes, blocking Jacqueline from seeing, and pressed down hard. Jacqueline screamed, and in response did something she never saw coming. With all her might, Jacqueline pulled Mary's neck slightly to the right, then slammed her down to the floor so hard Mary fell unconscious. Jacqueline, now free of Mary, fighting back, rubbed her pained eyes. She was gasping too, out of breath, but for a few seconds realized the room was too silent. She looked down when her eyes readjusted and saw that Mary was on the floor, obscured in shadows of the room that had now been darkened with the fire and the earth extinguished. Carefully, Jacqueline checked on Mary, and then she knelt down. She saw that Mary had landed face down on her belly on the cold, hard floor. Mary was now bleeding from her womb. Jacqueline gasped, Mary's baby, her stomach. The fight happened so fast she didn't even think of the danger of the child. Mary was crying. Jacqueline rolled over and tapped her cheeks. Mary was white as a ghost. She kept tapping, trying to wake her up. Jacqueline could see the bruising had caused on Mary's neck. Oh, please, please wake up. Mary, please wake up, Mary, Jacqueline said. Philip had been out in the woods, Good Island, hunting for dinner. He had killed a small pig that would feed he and Mary very well for the at least 2 nights of this new bitter winter. As he made his way back to the cottage, he passed a small dock side and noticed a small boat had been latched on one of the posts. His own boat had been locked up in the boathouse. He wondered who was on the island and what they were doing at the cabin with Mary. There was so much blood. Jacqueline's own dress was now drenched on it. Baby was dying. Jacqueline didn't know what to do. She tried to wake Mary. Then Philip started to unlock the front door on his way back from the evening hunt for dinner. Jacqueline, panicking, and got up off the floor. She looked around and grabbed a small bundle of clothes that wasn't even hers and looked as if she would need new clothes now that she lived with Sebastian and had no time to pack her own. And Jacqueline left the small cottage through the back door. Philip entered the room, saw in disarray. He threw his catch to tools to the floor, frantically searching for answers with his eyes. Mary, Mary, where are you? He asked slowly, making his way through the messy room. He then came across Mary slowly, coming out of unconscious state. He saw the blood. Mary slowly woke and saw the blood. She screamed and fell to the floor. Help her. To help her, the blood was everywhere. He took her to the sofa and laid back. Her body was forcing the child out too early. She screamed in pain. He begged for God to help him deliver his child, alive and healthy, still unknowing what had happened. Let's see. Okay, breathe, my love, breathe, Philip said as Mary's body pushed the baby out into his arms. More blood everywhere. Mary's head tossed back on the sofa, fell limp as she fainted with the pain. In Philip's arms, a child, a little girl, dead. The baby did not survive Mary's fall. Her tummy had been bashed into the floor and crushed in a lethal blow. He screamed a painful scream that echoed deep across Good Island. He begged God to make him wake up from this horrid dream where his first child had died in his arms. Jacqueline cowardly rushes towards Good Island boat docking, fleeing the flight where she caused the death of a child. Philip screams hit her in the chest like a lightning bolt. She began to sob as she got in the little boat headed back to Lockwood Thicket where Sebastian was hiding. Back at the cottage, Philip rocked back and forth on the floor with the little girl in his arms. Mary woke from her fainting spell and saw the scene of her baby where she had fallen in love with, screamed so painful that Philip could not bear it. He got up and took the child and placed her in a little blanket. Give me my baby, Mary screamed over and over again. Mary, no. No, Mary, no, 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 Philip said in sobs. Philip, no, Mary, wailed when realizing the baby was gone. He brought the baby back, sat with Mary on the blood-soaked sofa as they cuddled together, their little baby, gone before she could leave. After dinner at Terramore, Evie sat next to Gabriel's crib and rocked back and forth, lulling the baby to sleep. She sang to him in a sweet lullaby, hoping that somehow her voice would flow into his ears as he could finally hear his mother's voice. It was a prayer she had that hopefully some sort of miracle would occur and her darling son would begin his hearing. As Evie rocked baby Gabriel to sleep, Jacqueline appeared in the shadows of the room. She watched her so-called new friend as Evie too began to slowly blink her way into a deep sleep. Her eyes finally closed and her hands stopped rocking in the crib. Both baby and mother was in dream world. Jacqueline then entered Evie's mind again, began to set the stage for yet another encounter with Matthew. In her dream, Evie walked along a road she did not recognize. It was dark all around her. There were no sounds except for the crashing waves off a far off invisible ocean that Evie only guessed was somewhere in front of her through a thick fog. In that fog, a person appeared. It was Jacqueline as Matthew. She called to him, but she did not answer. He only pointed toward the fog from which he was coming. She called to him and walked faster to meet him. He kept walking faster too. She began to chase him frantically, begging him to stop as the two entered the thick fog of her dream. Matthew, where are you? Tell me, where are you? Evie screamed as Matthew vanished in the thick fog. She was now totally consumed by the white clouds all around her. Her direction was confused. She wasn't sure how she got to the point where she was. Matthew's voice suddenly could be heard. It began begging Evie to find him, saying he was still alive, and only she could find him wherever he was. But Evie asked him to reveal his location. He could only say again for her to find him. She tried to find where his voice was coming from. The fog in this stream was thicker than ever. Dark, even clouds of black and white smoke that swirled all around her. She couldn't see. She couldn't see find him for him or way out of it. Then, as she made a step toward Evie, felt as she made a step forward, Evie fell off a cliff in her dream, cowering down into sharp rocks below. But just before she hit bottom, Evie woke screaming in her child's room. My God, Jacob said, rushing into the next room. He had been home from the office for only a little while before Evie screamed. What is it? He asked her. I was dreaming. I'm sorry. Did I wake you? She asked. No, I just got home, he said. Look at her strange as Jacqueline continued to hide within the shadows of the corner of the baby's room. On saying, I'm sorry, Jacob. I've been having these very vivid dreams lately. Nightmares, actually. He said. So I've heard, Jacob replied. Celeste told you? Evie asked as Jacob nodded. I wish she hadn't. I think it's silly, really. We've all had nightmares, haven't we? We have, but not quite so real as the ones you've been describing. The fact you spoke to Father Ryan about them makes me feel like there's more to these dreams than what you actually know, Jacob said. What do you mean? They're just dreams, Jacob, nothing more, she replied, knowing how Jacob's mind worked. Now he loved to twist reality into something much more sinister. I think I know why you're having these dreams, these nightmares. There's something I've been keeping from you, he revealed. Jacqueline's eyes widened. She could sense what he was about to do. What is it? Evie standing up from the chair and putting herself between Jacob and the baby's crib, almost as if she was prepared to protect the baby from the sharp shrapnel, whatever Jacob was about to say. The night that my mother took Gabriel and did what she did at the top of the lighthouse, I was there to take the baby to safety, but I wasn't the only one there. Evie furrowed her brow, confused, concerned, and suspicious of Jacob's history of lies. Jacqueline's mind searched Jacob's for what he was about to say, and Sebastian's face appeared. It was Sebastian, Evie. He's alive. He survived the fire, Jacob revealed, rocking Evie to the core. What? No, stop this. I saw what I saw. I saw his body evaporate in front of my eyes into ashes. I saw it, Jacob. He died, she said. No, no, he survived it, Evie. I saw him and spoke to him, and perhaps this is why you're dreaming the way you are. It's not Matthew who's filling your mind. It must be Sebastian. He's trying something. I don't know. Mind control, I don't know. But he's been here too, to see Gabriel. That's who was in the nursery the other night. Not a stranger. It was him, your vampire husband. Evie's mind began to swell. She felt a surge of fear rush over her. She had been so sure he was gone, she was so sure that he died in the fire almost a year earlier. She begged for Jacob to tell her the truth. She begged him, pulling at her collar of his shirt, pounding on his chest, but the truth had already been said. I can't take back what I said, Evie. He is alive. Perhaps we can do something to keep you safe. Maybe have you go into hiding, Jacob suggested. Yes, yes, I can do that. That baby and I would, she began to say, but before Jacob heard, no, just you. What, Evie asked. Jacob walked over to the baby, looked down at the air of half of the billions of coffers of the Lord family, said he was an adorable child, sleeping like an angel, and one of his son Fabian's biggest rivals. You're not safe taking a child. You're not safe if Sebastian is after you. I can see what it's doing to your mind. We all can, he told Evie. Evie's eyes narrowed. Jacqueline's too, as she was still in the corner watching carefully. I don't believe you, Evie replied coldly. Now, not get out of this room and leave me and Gabriel alone, she said, pulling him away from the crib and once again placing herself between child and great uncle. I'll let you think about it, Evangeline, because none of this will end well for anyone if you don't take my advice, Jake replied. Evie pursed her lips in anger at what Jacob was trying to do, coerced her to leave the Terramore without her son, and a shunned request, a clear reach for control. But Jacob was only giving her an option. He and Celeste had already set themselves up for much more with legal papers. She lifted her hand up and pointed to the nursery door. Out. Jacqueline fumed at this. She did not want Evie to know the man she loved, the man Evie once loved and was alive and roaming the island somewhere in the dark. What would this trigger in Evie? Jacqueline wondered. Reclaimed love. Jacob bowed his head and obliged. She didn't take his veiled offer, her easy way out, his bait. He went back into his room where Celeste was sitting at a vanity in her nightgown of white silk that shined in the glowing orange light of the newly installed electric lamp. She turned to the door and put his finger to his lips, shushing her. What? She whispered. He walked over to Celeste. Its long, her legs curved like the legs of a giraffe. He opened the drawer and pulled out the legal papers that they had both signed to take ward of baby Gabriel. Tomorrow we file, he said. Tomorrow we solidify our future and our sons forever. Celeste uncomfortably smiled, continued to brush her hair in the vanity. The next morning, Evie sat in the breakfast nook at the kitchen Terramore, sipping at her coffee. She hadn't slept well at night. Her dreams had subsided, but her conversation Jacob kept her mind alert. She had only 3 hours before the sun came up. She wondered about Sebastian and how it was possible for him to be alive, how it was possible for him to have survived the fire within he reached. His body vanished into a pile of ashes. She wished for it to be a lie, but something deep in her heart told her Jacob was telling the truth. Miss, a voice said from a doorway lead the kitchen into a larger sitting room. Evie turned to see Jane O'Donnell, head of the housekeeping in the mansion, standing there with Gabriel in her arms. Oh, I'm sorry, I'll take him, Evie said. No, no, that's okay. I just wanted to tell you someone is here to see you. She's out in the garden, Miss Jacqueline Gray, Jane revealed. Evie smiled and hailed with excitement to see her new friend. She quickly filled her coffee cup and the second one with Jacqueline and headed to the garden where Jacqueline was sitting under the gazebo, bundled up in various furs and gloves. What are you doing out here? It's freezing, Evie said, handed her new friend a hot coffee. Fresh air is good for us, Jacqueline replied, happily taking the coffee as Evie sat next to her. To what do I owe this very welcome visit? Evie asked, incredibly happy to see a friendly face, despite Jacqueline's dark intentions. I just wanted to see how you were. You look tired. Are you okay? The witch asked. Evie shook her head. I've had a complicated night. I didn't sleep well, and I had another one of those dreams about Matthew. Then I got into a bit of an argument with Sebastian's uncle Jacob, Evie revealed, but Jacqueline already knew all this. What was he arguing about? She asked. It doesn't matter, really. He's just being very, I don't know how to describe him, meddling. Yes, meddling, Evie said, but I'm glad you're here. It's good to see a friendly face. My brother works so much, and my mother has been spending time at Gregory's. I haven't really had anyone around. I'm always here for you, Evie. Jacqueline smiled. You mentioned you had another dream. Did Matthew ask you to follow him again? Evie sipped her coffee. Yes, I fell off a cliff and yes, almost into the sea before I woke. I wish I could understand what it all meant, but everyone I ask says it's probably just stress. Maybe you should go look for him, Jacqueline said. Evie surprised. I mean, I'm a big believer in what dreams tell us. Maybe there's something to it. I don't understand. Why would you think that? Matthew isn't alive. He died. We all know he died. This isn't the same situation that Genevieve is going through, Evie said. Genevieve? Oh, just one of our former house guests. She left town recently in search of David Lord, Sebastian's father, Rebecca's other son. He's been missing for over a decade. I heard it through the grapevine that the reason she left without her son because she was sure he was out alive out there somewhere. These dreams, I'm happy, they're not the same. I don't want Genevieve thinks she'll find, but I, for one, know that poor Matthew's gone. It breaks my heart every day, every time I think of it. But I have let him go, Evie explained. But he hasn't let you go, Evie. Listen to me. Something tells me that this is real, Jacqueline said, trying to get Evie to listen to her and to agree to leave so that she could have Sebastian all to herself. Evie looked at her new friend with new eyes. She didn't understand why she'd be so pressed to convince her to go on a wild goose chase for a man lost at sea. Storm at sunk Matthew's ship would have been impossible to service, even though one man did. I don't know, Evie said before Aaron Hempstead interrupted. Miss Lord, Jane needs you inside. Evie nodded. She thanked Jacqueline for coming, but you had to excuse herself to tend to Gabriel. Of course, Jacqueline, said her new friend. We'll catch up soon. Evie quickly made her way out of the frozen garden into the house. Aaron remained outside, staring at Jacqueline. Something about her made his antennas perk up. He didn't trust her. Jacqueline handed Aaron the empty coffee cup and thanked him for bringing back to the house for her. And feeling slightly defeated, she felt left Terramore. But for her, it was not over. Jacqueline would get what she wanted to the love of her life, Sebastian, even if it meant keeping Evie away from him for all eternity. She could not allow them to see each other, perhaps rekindle their passionate love, now that Evie knew he was alive. This was a fear Jacqueline had. She couldn't lose him, not to Evie, not now, not ever. So Jacqueline is trying to, again, get Evie out of the picture, but so is Jacob. Jacob's probably going to be a little more successful. Um, I will say that my camera just like tried to go off on me. Uh, I will say that I'm curious how concerned Jacob is at this Jacqueline girl. He doesn't seem too concerned. He would be if he knew what Barry knew. Um, that girl crazy. Remember what I said? DTAJ. Don't trust Jacqueline at all. Don't trust. So very, very good. Link to Benight Beguile is going to be in the description box. Guys, go check it out.